And you can't mention elections these days without talking about the impact of this man, Nigel Farage. I'll be asking him if UKIP really is fit for prime time.
The real common denominator about UKIP voters across the spectrum is they're mostly not very political.
And it's that people's army that, if UKIP can get to a polling booth, might just create that earthquake they want.
And Nigel Farage joins me now. Welcome back to the Sunday Politics. Now, when you decided not to stand at the New York by-election, you said that if you lost, quote, the bubble would have burst. What did you mean by that?
Did I?
Yes.
I was asked at 7:21 would I stand in the Newark by-election when Patrick Mercer resigned, and at 7:30 I was addressing 1,000 people in a room in Bath. I said, I'll think about it. By 7 o'clock the next morning I'd said I wasn't going to stand it up. I've never made any comment about the bubble bursting at all.
So you're denying that you said that?
I'm denying that I said it, and I also, this idea that I equivocated. No, I didn't know Mercer was going to. I didn't know Mercer was going to resign.
I just wanted to know what you meant by the bubble being bursting. Anyway, you claim only a handful of UKIP candidates have ever said things that are either stupid or offensive. I'm right on that quote. Yeah. Yeah,
it's okay. 0.01% of them. It's too. I mean, I'd rather it was none.
I understand, but why have you chosen a candidate to fight this high-profile by-election that has said many things that most people would regard as stupid or offensive?
Well, you know, Roger Helmer is fighting this by-election for us. He's somebody of 70 years of age who grew up with a strong Christian Bible background. He grew up in an age when homosexuality was actually imprisonable, and he had a certain set of views which he maintained for many years, which he now says he accepts, the world's moved on, and he's relaxed about it.
So the quotes about him on race or on homosexuality are not from the Dark Ages or when he was growing up. They're from 2 or 3 years ago.
When he was a Conservative, yes, I know. So will you be asking Mr. Cameron that question? You know, this is remarkable. I've never seen a single comment from Roger Helmer on race that would be deemed to be offensive, ever.
Really?
No, really.
And what about homosexuality? Do you regard his comments on that as offensive?
As I say, you know, when Roger grew up, and indeed when he was an adult, homosexuality was illegal in this country, and he held that view for some period of time.
But this is 2012.
And actually,
he said,
if we asked the 70s and over in this country how they felt about it, most of them still feel uncomfortable. He has said the world has moved on. He now accepts there's been a big social change in Britain, and he's relaxed about it.
But in 2012, he said, if 2 men can be married, why not 3? Or why not 2 men and a woman? Why not a commune? That's only 2 years ago.
There are a lot of people in this country who are disconcerted by the change in the traditional meaning of marriage. And I think in a tolerant society, we understand that some people have different views.
But he said he's changed his views now.
He does.
In only 2 years.
He says he's more relaxed about it.
And you've chosen him. Was he your candidate, by the way, to fight New York?
Was he my candidate? Yeah. I haven't got a candidate. The local branch.
Did you want him to fight New York?
The local branch chose him. He's a first-class campaigner. Unlike almost everybody else in politics today, he's had 30 years in industry. He served in the European Parliament. He's a good candidate.
Now, this morning's papers say that you're about to select Victoria Ailing for Grimsby at the general election.
Right. Well,
she's on camera saying, quote, of immigrants, I just want to send the lot back.
No, she doesn't say that. But this is all very interesting, Andrew, and we can talk about this. Or what we could talk about is the fact that in 12 days' time, we have a national election, a European election, and every voter across the United Kingdom can vote on it. And it's really interesting. You don't want to talk about it. The Labour Party don't want to talk about it.
Are you happy to pick a candidate who says of immigrants, I just want to send the lot back?
She doesn't say that, and it's a complete misquote.
It's on tape. Her husband
yes, and I've seen the tape, and it's a complete misquote. And she says it. She says it in the context of illegal immigrants, and she says that's what I'd like to say, but now I can't say it.
Well, I've seen the full quotes around it, and that's not the context of illegal. It's not illegal. She talks about the lot, all immigrants.
No, she doesn't.
Let's come on to the European campaign. Now, you've used a company that employs East Europeans to deliver your leaflets in London and the home counties.
Have we?
Have you got, yes. Have you got some...
I'm told that in Croydon, one branch might have done that.
Have you found some indigenous Brits to deliver the leaflets in New York?
Well, we've got thousands of them joining the party every month, and they're not all indigenous, because what's really interesting is that in today's opinion polls, for the first time ever, UKIP is above not just the Lib Dems, but the Conservatives in terms of the numbers of the ethnic communities that are voting UKIP.
Now, in these elections, you say that you'll abolish inheritance tax, income tax for those on the minimum wage, you'll cut business taxes, you'll cut council tax.
I'm not talking about any of those things.
You'll cut fuel duty.
No, I'm not talking about any of those things. I'm fighting a European election. That is the election we're fighting.
But it's all,
and let's
it's
talk
all
about
on the
the
front
European
page of your website.
Well, I'm sorry, but that is not for now. You know, that is not for now. We have not agreed a manifesto for the general election. We will do over the course of the summer.
But this is in your local election manifesto.
Yes, but we are having, and there are local elections in some parts of the country, but we're fighting a European election. And it is actually impossible with the British media to have an intelligent debate on the European question.
Oh, that may be fine, but as I say, we're also fighting the local elections too. Now, and so you've promised all these tax cuts. How much would they cost?
No idea. I'm not here to talk about I've read the local election manifesto. It doesn't make those promises.
Well, actually, it does. I mean, I looked at it last night.
We talk in the local election manifesto. We do talk about local services. We do talk about the need to try and keep council tax down. But we don't talk about income tax. Absolutely not.
You also say...
I'm sorry, this is just not right.
In local election campaigning, you also say you'd restore cuts to policing, double prison places, create a new wave of grammar school, restore cuts to frontline NHS, spend more on roads and on public transport.
Well, there is no...
How much would all that cost?
I'm sorry, you're obviously reading different documents to me. We have not...
It's your website, not mine.
Yeah, we're voting for local councillors in district councils who have got little local budgets.
But that's in your local election manifesto.
Well, every party in a manifesto puts its aspirations.
You read it?
Of course I've read it, cover to cover, which is why I'm saying you've misquoted some of this. The thought that we're talking about income tax in a local election manifesto is clearly nonsense.
By the way, on the bubble bursting, if you had lost New York, you told that to Norman Smith of the BBC.
75% of Britain's laws are now made in the European Union. We have a complete game of denial going on with AstraZeneca potentially being taken over by Pfizer, the BBC News refusing to even show the British public, despite the fact that it's a public service broadcaster, that decision cannot be taken here, but only by an unelected European Commissioner. And we sit here and argue about what is in or is not in the local election manifesto. It's been, for 40 years, we deserved an argument on this.
It's my job in the run-up to an election to read the party's manifestos.
Well, let's talk about the election.
To put the points into them. But let me come on to AstraZeneca and the European dimension. Is it your view that a British government should stop the takeover of AstraZeneca?
It can't.
No, but you could change the law.
No. I'm sorry, it can't. Can we please get this clear? I sat next to the shadow business secretary, Chukaramuna, the other night in question time, and he said what should and shouldn't be done. If you listen to what Vince Cable said, he chose his words carefully. He said, I'm being studiously neutral, is what he told the House of Commons, and the reason is we don't have this power. And that is what the European elections is about.
So why did France stop the takeover of Danone, the food company?
Well, we have this bizarre situation in the European Union where, Germany is burning more coal than ever. We're closing our coal-fired power stations next year, and we seem to do things to the nth degree and nobody else does. Perhaps that's because we have this culture that if we have a rule, whether we like it or not, we obey it.
But just to be clear, regardless of the legal position, in your view, you don't think Pfizer should be allowed to buy AstraZeneca?
Well, I think that Pfizer's recent record in Britain, particularly with the closure of the sandwich plant and the loss of thousands of jobs in East Kent, isn't terribly good, and that there is some good science within AstraZeneca which is in danger of being asset stripped and lost.
Because AstraZeneca is run by a Swede and a Frenchman.
It is.
And most of its employees are overseas.
A lot of it's
not quite the British company people make it out to be.
A lot of it's in Sweden, I know that, and I understand that, but there is still some good science being produced here.
What did you make of the Prime Minister this morning saying that he would not form a government post an election, if he was in a position to do so, unless he was able to have a referendum on 2017? You must welcome that.
Well, he has a difficulty in being believed, because 5 years ago I sat here talking to you about the European elections, and you put to me, well, it's going to be very difficult, Nigel, for people to vote UKIP, because Mr Cameron has given a cast-iron guarantee that if he becomes Prime Minister next year, he'll have a referendum on the Lisbon Treaty. He didn't deliver on that, and he knows that people struggle to believe, firstly, that he'll get a majority, and secondly, that the renegotiation is actually worth a row of beans.
But he is saying he will not form a government unless he can go forward to a referendum.
I know. He is desperately trying to pretend to be a Eurosceptic, whilst at the same time saying, whatever the results of all of this, he will campaign for Britain to remain in. And in a sense, again, that's what this election's about. We have three traditional parties, plus the SNP implied, all of whom passionately believe in continued membership of the European Union, and we have UKIP saying we want trade and cooperation, but there's a bigger and better world out there, and that really is what this is about.
You're now travelling with, I think, 4 bodyguards. when you're out and about. Has this affected you and your family life? Are you getting fed up with it?
I can't stand it. I mean, I've always been a free spirit that's wandered around the place and done my own thing. I'm afraid that the level of threat sadly, we have a couple of organisations out there headed up by senior Labour Party figures who purport to be against fascism and extremism, who receive funding from a Department of the Communities, who receive funding from trade unions, who have acted in a violent way more than once. And
sorry, you're saying the Labour Party is behind these threats?
No, I said Unite Against Fascism and Hope Not Hate are taxpayer funded, they are trade union funded, and they're headed up by very senior Labour Party figures. And I'm perfectly happy for them to come to my meetings and have an argument with me. But it's not so much fun when they're banging you over the head with banners.
Going through this, you still keen to be an MP?
Oh, yes. I mean, but let's get this out of the way. And what UKIP will then do is we will target, you know, for the general election next year.
Wouldn't life be easier if you just went to the Lords? That's where most anti-establishment candidates run.
I think that's about the last thing I want to do. You know, there's an awful lot to do. Most of all, you know, I will not rest until we're freed from political union and governed from Brussels.
Right. Nigel Farage, thank you for being with us. While we're clarifying things, I should also point out that Nigel Farage said to Norman Smith, the BBC's always reliable Norman Smith, that if he ran in New York and lost, quote, the bubble would burst. But in the Department of Fairness and Accuracy, I should point out that though a number of the tax rises I mentioned on council tax, minimum wage tax, and some other things that UKIP wants to cut, a couple of these are in the local government manifesto, but several are not. They're on the UKIP website, which is still current and dated 2014.